Our reading today is from the book Help, Thanks, Wow by Anne Lamott, who writes, "You may be wondering what I even mean when I use the word prayer. It's certainly not like what TV Christians mean. It's not for display purposes like plastic sushi or neon. Prayer is private even when we pray with others. It's communication from the heart to that which surpasses understanding. Let's say it's communication from one's heart to God. Or if that is too triggering or ludicrous a concept for you, to the good, the force that is beyond our comprehension, but that in our pain or supplication or relief, we don't need to define or have proof of or any established contact with. Let's say it's what the Greeks called the really real, what lies within us, beyond the scrim of our values, positions, convictions, and wounds. Or let's say it's a cry from deep within to life or love with capital L's. Nothing could matter less than what we call this force. I know some ironic believers who call God Howard, as in, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Let's not get bogged down on whom or what we pray to. Let's just say prayer is communication from our hearts to the great mystery or goodness or Howard, to the animating energy of love we are sometimes bold enough to believe in, to something unimaginably big and not us. We could call this force not me and not preaching on stage to a choir of 800. Or for convenience, we could just say God. This last August, I had the privilege of spending 6 days on a silent retreat. Now, when Unitarian Universalists think of silent retreats, it's often Buddhist in nature, and one spends many, many hours a day sitting on a cushion in silent meditation. But this was a specifically Unitarian Universalist silent retreat run by 4 Unitarian Universalist ministers in California, and it was a lovely thing. I wanted to go because, like many of you, my life feels just a tiny bit overwhelming sometimes. And I thought a week of quiet would be a really good thing for me. And it was, but perhaps not in the way I had expected it to be. There were all sorts of classes offered, from Qigong to soul collage to meditation to prayer to labyrinth walking and Taizé-style chanting. We were encouraged to bring spiritual books to read instead of your favorite mystery novel, and invited to bring in art supplies and yoga mats. The retreat center was located in Rancho Palos Verdes, just outside of Los Angeles, with lots of hiking trails nearby. And friends, I carped the heck out of that DM. I went for long walks in the morning. I made art. I read 6 books in 5 days. I walked the labyrinth 4 times. I went to Vespers every night and did Qigong and chanted and sang and wrote letters. It felt like Unitarian Universalist summer camp. I loved it. But I confess, I wondered if I was doing it wrong. Was I supposed to get quiet and not do much? How could I get quiet if I was doing so much? I was having a great time, and I was getting the renewal that I needed in many ways, but was I doing it wrong? I asked my spiritual director, Batya, and bless her heart, she made a suggestion. If you have been part of this congregation for several years, you might know that one of my deepest spiritual moments came 38 years ago, walking on the Isle of Iona off the coast of Scotland, where I spent the new year I'd turned 19, while on a study abroad trip of 5 months in Scotland and England. And on New Year's Day, I walked around this island. It's about 3.5 miles long and a mile wide, home of 100 people and about 1,000 sheep. And I sat on this old stone bench with a 13th century crumbling monastery staring out at the ocean, which is like probably from me to Jenny, maybe. And I heard this voice in my head that said, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God. Well, Batya heard this story and heard my worries about not being still enough and said, "Hey, maybe that's not the word you need to focus on in that sentence. Maybe it's not stillness you need. Maybe try taking it one word at a time and see where you end up. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Except my favorite grace in a large group is, and I'm going to have you repeat this back to me because that's how it works well. It is. It is. It is good. It is good. It is good to be. It is good to be. It is good to be here. It is good to be here. It is good to be here together. It is good to be here together. And so that's the direction I went in. Be still. Be still and know. Be still and know that I am. And as I am rounding the end of the labyrinth, closing in on the center, I suddenly hear, "Be still and know that I am God." Now, as you heard for opening words, one of my favorite singers, John Hyatt, said there's only two things you need to know about God. It exists and you are not it. And yet, walking that labyrinth, worrying that I am doing silent retreat all wrong because I want to chant hymns in my head and be busy making art and reading poetry, suddenly I realized that this "be still and know that I am God" meant that I too am part of the holy divinity that is in everything and everyone. That I am not doing it wrong because I too am part of that holy mystery, and that there isn't a wrong way to do retreat, and there isn't a wrong way to do prayer. It was probably clinical pastoral education when I realized that I didn't pray the same way that other people did necessarily. I remember being in a room with two sisters who were about my age, which at the time was mid-30s, as they waited for their mother to be taken off life support. It was a painful time, and at one point I asked if they'd like me to pray. "She's dying. What is there to pray for?" one of them asked me. "I'm not going to pray for her," I responded. "I thought I'd pray for you." "Huh," she said. "Okay." So I prayed for these sisters caught up in a complex family relationship. I prayed thank you for the life of their mother, for their years with her and all that she had brought to them. I prayed help for them, for God to give them strength and fortitude in this difficult time, and so they could be a gentle hand guiding them to gentleness with one another as they grieved differently their different relationships with their mother. In that experience of hospital chaplaincy, I learned a lot about prayer. I learned that no one seemed to mind my substituting "in the name of all that is holy" for "in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ." I learned that the word God is for most people the best shorthand for that divine spirit of mystery and love. And perhaps most interestingly, I learned that to pray gratitude for the life of the person that I am praying with is a profound act of love that touches people deeply. to say thank you for the life of a person, not after they're gone, but now while they are living, is to tell them that you see that their life has meaning. It's a profound way of seeing someone and their own worth. And especially for older women who our culture doesn't especially see, it can bring up some deep, deep stuff. Anne Lamott writes in her book on prayer that nearly all prayers are some variation on help, thanks, or wow. Help can be what we think of as petitionary prayer. It can be as simple as, "Oh God, please help me find my car keys." It can be as achingly desperate as, "Oh God, please save my child from cancer." It can be as in the moment as hitting bottom and realizing that you don't have a clue how to get out of this one and becoming so desperate for a lifeline that you are willing to reach out to some larger something somewhere that you don't even know if you believe in, just to stop being here alone in the darkness anymore. Lamott writes, "My belief is that when you're telling the truth, you're close to God. If you say to God, 'I am exhausted and depressed right now beyond words, and I don't like you at all right now, and I recoil from most people who believe in you,' that might be the most honest thing you've ever said. If you told me that you had said to God, 'It is all hopeless, and I don't have a clue if you exist, but I could use a hand,' it would almost bring tears to my eyes, tears of pride in you, for the courage it takes to get real, really real. It would make me want to sit next to you at the dinner table." Reaching out to something, anything greater than ourselves is a humbling experience, because we have to acknowledge that something is greater than ourselves. And sometimes I think Unitarian Universalists could stand to be a little more humble. I don't believe in an intercessory God. I don't believe God decides who lives, who dies, and who wins the football game. But that's not what prayer is about. Sometimes that's what we want it to be about. Sometimes we long for a God who will make it all better, who will heal the sick, especially when they're young, who will put an end to war and violence. Heck, we want a God who puts the right person in the White House. Is that too much to ask? Yes, it is. And I don't know the why any more than you do. Sometimes tend to put down folks who believe in an intercessory God who answers prayer literally. I worry about how that works taken to its natural conclusion, because if we believe that God answers the prayers of the faithful, if we just believe enough, then what happens when your child doesn't get better? When your sister gets cancer and leaves young kids behind, when someone dies of a fentanyl overdose, for God's sake. That idea that God answers prayers but not yours, what does that do to your belief in God? And yet, I believe, not in an intercessory God, but I believe in a creative force in the universe that I call God. I believe in some kind of benevolence, not that we get what we ask for, not that justice prevails, but that over time, just in a teeny tiny way, the world might just get more just and more kind. And this is the belief that lets me sleep at night. That there is someone, somewhere, something bigger than I am out there. That being doesn't always do what I want. She doesn't give me what I ask for, at least not most of the time. She doesn't keep the good people from dying and take the bad ones instead, because that's not how it works. But for me, I know that there is something larger than I am out there. Maybe it's God. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's the power of gathered humanity. Maybe it's science. Regardless of what it is, I can lean into it and be comforted. I believe that I can call out in my darkest hours and something hears me. Because it is good for me to make that call. It is good for me to realize that I am not all that I don't have to be all that I just get to be Marcia, minister, mom, partner, friend. The world does not revolve around me, thank goodness. In my tiny little sphere, I get to do the work of God in the world, which is just to make my own tiny little corner more kind, more just, and more compassionate. Lamott writes that the prayer of help really is just, quote, letting go for a moment of our sweaty, tight grip on any particular problem long enough to breathe, long enough to step away, to see the middle distance, to regroup, renew. She writes, most good, honest prayers remind me that I am not in charge, that I cannot fix anything, and that I open myself to being helped by something, some force, some friends, something. These prayers say, dear something, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't see where I'm going. I am getting more lost and more afraid and more clenched. Help. Some people can do that work in the world without believing in anything, and power to them. But I think whether it's God or not, and I know for a lot of us it's not God, but believing in something, including humanity, that is greater than our individual selves, helps. Partly because it keeps us humble, partially because it reminds us of the world outside, partially because that if we believe that the world begins and ends with us, it is easy to forget to be grateful. Which brings us to Anne Lamott's second prayer, which is thanks. There is so much hard stuff in life, so much pain and unfairness, and also so much beauty. Thank you reminds us to be grateful. Because frankly, forgive the rhyme, an attitude of gratitude makes us calmer, happier people. Everyone gets a certain amount of happiness and a certain amount of crap in their lives, and gratitude teaches us to pay more attention to the happiness, paying more attention to what went well than what went badly. Thanks doesn't have to be because something went well. It can be thank you for those who helped us through it, for the casserole that appears on our doorstep on the darkest day that reminds us that we really don't have to do this all alone. That some person cares for us and about us and will travel some part of the journey through with us. Lamott writes, so I say thanks because Revelation has shown me things that are miserable that somehow I might get to sidestep, or that are miserable but that prayer and friends help me find a way through, or that are painful and beautiful in ways that make your heart ache, that draw you closer forever to the comrades who have walked with you. We all get to say thanks because even in the things that are the hardest so far, we have all made it through. We are all still here. We have come through everything life has thrown at us so far, and we will survive everything to come until we die, which every one of us will do at some point or another. But until then, it's all okay. We've survived. On prayer, or gratitude, or gripping tightly, or letting go, or the love of friends, or the kindness of strangers. I believe that our job is to spread that kindness around, to show others that kindness that has blessed our lives in gratitude for those who have blessed our own. Lamott writes, gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. It almost always makes you willing to be of service, which is where the joy resides. It means you are willing to stop being such a jerk. When you are aware that all that has been given to you in your lifetime and in the past few days, it is hard not to be humbled and pleased to give back. And finally, and perhaps my personal favorite, wow. Wow, Lamott writes, means we are not dulled to wonder. That we click into being fully present when we are stunned into that gasp by the sight of a birth or images of the World Trade Center falling, or the experience of being in a fjord at dawn for the first time. Wow is about having one's mind blown by the mesmerizing or the miraculous, the veins in a leaf, bird song, volcanoes. Wow is perhaps my favorite prayer and the one most deeply integrated into my own spiritual practice, which is walking in pretty places, noticing beauty and paying attention. In the words of Mary Oliver, Instructions on Living a Life, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. Reason number one is that it changes me. Like prayer, walking in beauty reminds me that I don't have to do everything, that I am just one teensy part of the whole great universe, from my toenails that look like the depths of the ocean to the stars of the highest cosmos on my stole. I believe that having a sense of awe and wonder is a glorious part of gratitude. How can we not be grateful for mountains and oceans and the Fibonacci sequence of a perfect dahlia? How can we not be grateful for river otters playing and a glorious sunset and meteor showers, for goodness sake? Remembering to say, wow, reminds me that my place in the universe, which is far, far less important than I seem to worry about in my own head. Some people would miss me, sure, but the world would keep on spinning on its axis, not concerned even a tiny bit with my existence. And this is a very good thing to remember sometimes. I remember the Talmudic story about the rabbi who carried a piece of paper in each pocket. One said, "The universe was created for you." And the other said, "From dust you were created, and to dust you shall return." The key is living in between those two. Lamott writes of C.S. Lewis's oft-quoted line that prayer doesn't change God, prayer changes me. More than anything, she continues, prayer helps me get my sense of humor back. It brings me back to my heart from the treacherous swamp of my mind. It brings me back to the now, to the holy moment. I have heard Unitarian Universalists ask how we can possibly pray, who we would pray to, and to me, that's the least interesting part of the question. It doesn't really matter if I'm addressing God, or love, or the universe, or Gus, or the old HP, or Howard. Prayer changes me, not because I get my way, but because I breathe, because I focus on something outside of myself and make a little space to get out of my own damn way. Whether it's help, or thanks, or wow. All of these prayers make me realize that I am not the center of the universe. And yet, I have a responsibility to be a blessing in it. To be the hands the holy has to do the work of God or love or the universe in the world. Whether that's rising up against oppression or praying with someone or bringing a tuna casserole. My hands, God's hands, same thing. Let go and breathe, my friends. We're going to need it. Now more than ever. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.